Hi, this is Sarah from sarayip.com, Facebook, The Numbers Queen, and Instagram, sarayip1111, with another special guest on my meditation series. This time we have Heather Plett, author of the book, The Art of Holding Space, which I'll be reviewing soon, and a co-founder of the Center for Holding Space. Now, I met Heather many years ago at a writing retreat at the big house in Pomona. Or it was somewhere
Mm,
around there. And I
yeah.
was so struck by her work. I've been following her forever now. Heather, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So, where are you calling from?
I'm in Canada, right in the geographical center of Canada in a city called Winnipeg.
Beautiful. So,
Mhm.
we met a while ago, and since then, I've
Yeah.
had another baby. You've had
Well,
a business baby.
I think you had one child at the first retreat that, yeah, so you've had two since then for
It
sure.
just is all a
Yeah.
blur at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm really excited to talk to you. We just have a few questions. So the first one is, when did you start meditating? You know, your form of meditation.
Yeah. So that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if I can pinpoint. Well, actually, probably the time when I started to explore mindfulness practices in general was around the time I had a stillborn son about 21 years ago,
Yeah.
almost 22 years ago.
Mm.
And that was a real transformative moment for me when that happened because I spent 3 weeks in the hospital trying to
Yeah.
save the pregnancy.
Mm.
And those 3 weeks kind of turned into a spiritual retreat. I really dropped down into a really kind of meditative place in the hospital that kind of surprised me and that was quite new for me. And I came out of there really curious and really wanting to find some access to what I had found in the hospital, which was so surprising. But I wanted to find, how can I tap into that kind of spiritual presence that I was able to find, because it totally disrupted my life.
Yeah.
And so then I started to really kind of explore different practices, and I found things like labyrinth walking. I did a lot of mandala work in those early
Mm-hmm.
days. That was a
Yeah.
creative practice that I found. So I don't do a lot of traditional seated meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Mine tends to be more movement meditation, walking meditation, or practices like that give me that mindfulness practice, but it's not as much sitting on a mat or sitting on a chair. Yeah.
I can relate to that. And you do actually talk about that experience in your book. It's an
I do.
incredibly powerful part of the book, and I'm really grateful that you are so open about these things that so many people hide and suffer with. So it sounds like you came to meditation work in this sort of darkest time. And was there, I mean, it sounds like in a way your son inspired you to meditate.
He definitely did. Like I've often said that he's been one of my spiritual guides in my life. That one when he really invited me to slow down because I had a really busy life. I had two children. I had a
Yeah.
full-time career in management and a government job, a lot of business
Mm,
travel, a lot going on. And so him coming into my life really kind of forced me to hit the pause button and just be still for a few weeks. And it was like I had to choose to be still to try to heal my body so that he could be born healthy. In the end, he was born dead, but it was still very much, it was like he came to ask me to slow down and to pause, and that was one of his purposes, is just to kind of disrupt what my patterns and what I'd been living, just a very busy, very mindless kind of busy life. And yeah, so that was really the role that he played in my life, was quite transformative.
and if I could ask, you gave him a name, didn't you?
Yes, his name was Matthew.
Beautiful.
Is
Well,
Matthew.
thank
Yeah.
you, Matthew. And thank you,
Mhm.
Heather. And I suppose, did you have other teachers? Did you do courses to learn to to help yourself to meditate, to calm yourself, to find that guidance.
Yeah. I don't, I have different teachers. I've taken some shamanic practice,
Mhm.
mindfulness practice, and that was I used to attend an annual gathering called Authentic Leadership in Action, and
Yeah.
that was rooted in shamanic practice. So I had some
Mhm.
teachers through that. I wouldn't say that I had a long time meditation teacher, somebody that guided me
Yeah.
along the way, partly because I dabbled in different
Mhm.
things. And so I would take some courses now and then, but didn't develop a long-term relationship with a particular teacher.
Yeah, and that's kind of great that you say that. I feel like that's one of the reasons people struggle to believe that what they're doing is meditation, or,
Hmm.
because they see the probably more historical way of meditating. Of
Right.
course, before social media, before a lot of different pressures, before even, that women were working so much.
Yeah.
And then they just can't believe, well, they can't believe they could ever achieve that. And they probably can't really without
Hmm.
some sort of serious issues in their other areas of their life.
Well, and I found a lot of teachers through books, quite honestly, and
Yeah.
I don't think we should downplay that value of just finding what you need when you need it. You know, not all of us can afford to go to meditation retreats or to ashrams or
Yeah.
whatever. So we do
Hmm.
what we can. We find books, we find guides in the ways that we can either afford to or have the time for, especially when like you're in the stage of life I was in at that time with three small kids,
Yeah.
and there just was not a lot of space or money left over at the end of the day to
It's so true.
to invest in expensive courses or retreats.
You get so creative.
Yeah, exactly. And we shouldn't downplay that. I think that that's really valuable. I gained a lot from just reading and talking to people, and you can learn things without needing to invest hugely financially in it.
Yeah, in a way, it has to come to you. I just sort
Hmm.
of have to draw it in, because even your book, I'm still reading it. It's probably been a year, and I have maybe a couple of pages a day I can read because I don't want to miss
Yeah.
anything. And often I have to reread things. And I used to read books in a day, and it's
And you
hard
will
for me to
again.
reconcile that. It takes me sometimes 6 months, a year, even
Yeah.
longer to really read a book now. And then I guess the
Yeah.
difference is I have to choose what I'm reading much more carefully, because it's deeper for me. I'm really like sensitive now that I still have a baby. I have really young children,
Yeah.
and it affects me more what I read and what I'm around.
Uh-huh. And it will change. This is the time of life you're in. I did very little reading when I had three small kids, and I've come back to it now in a much
Mm.
bigger way, but life changes, and those, and be present in what you have right now. And your children are your teacher right now. Like, that's one of your primary sources of learning mindfulness, is just being present with small children. I mean, they teach us so much, a lot of times more than we can get from gurus or from people that we pay lots of money to teach us. We just need to sit and watch our children.
I like to think that I'm my greatest teacher. But yes, it's my children are certainly on the faculty, and I have paid a lot of money for them. So I'm listening, I'm watching.
Yeah.
And yes, it's true. I always say, they're fresh off the boat, or whatever you say. So I do find they're super on, and they're such clear reflections. And I
Yeah.
have to practice everything I've ever learned with them just to make it through the next 2 hours. So yeah, thanks for recognizing that.
Yeah.
Now we had a few more questions. So obviously you've kind of answered one of them, which is, what are the situations where meditation has helped you? We know this is, in some way, it's helped you to bridge, I guess, coming back into your life after that hospital stay. Have there been other, I suppose, crises or crossroads where meditation or your meditative practices
Mhm.
have just been, really, really helpful?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that I find that a different practice shows up in every crisis that I've been
Wow.
in. Yeah, and it's like, because I remember, for example, when my mom was dying,
Mm-hmm.
this is over 7 years ago. She
Yeah.
had cancer, and so she was dying of cancer. And the last few months were really intense, and I could not focus on any of the practices that had given me meaning or support before. And suddenly one day, it was random, but I was walking along the shore of the river I live close to, and I started, there's a bunch of big rocks there, and I started
Mm,
doing rock balancing.
mm,
That it's a Zen tradition to balance
mhm.
rocks in precarious angles.
Yeah.
And I, for the next 3 months, I would go to the river almost every day to just, quiet my mind and sit there and try to balance rocks on top of each other and create these structures. I can't tell you how meaningful that was in the time
Wow.
when everything else in my life felt out of control. I was losing my mom, but those moments just gave me, slowed my breathing down, because you have to be really still when you're holding a
Mhm.
rock and trying to
Yep.
balance it.
Yep. Mhm.
And it was exactly what I needed right then. And those things have happened to me other times too. And I've gone through crisis when my marriage ended, or my former husband had some mental health issues where he ended up in treatment for them in the psychiatric ward. And so those were really intense times. And
Mm.
almost every time there's some kind of meaningful practice. And very often after that period is done, I don't go back to it. I don't know that I've done any rock balancing since, but it was what I needed for those 3 months to support me while mom was dying.
Wow. And we know, one of the ways that I guess we found each other is because you ended up writing a blog on holding space, and it was about your mum.
Mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
it was like many millions of people have seen it now.
Yeah.
And it kind of forced you, didn't it, to find out how to hold space for yourself?
Yeah, it was a little ironic actually, because I wrote this post, now it's 7 years ago, I think,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
mom had died a couple of years before that. And so I wrote this blog post really trying to examine what it means to hold space. And I found the way to define it by witnessing the palliative care nurse that had been
Yeah.
supporting my family and my mom as mom was dying. In those days in her home, we cared for her as she was dying. So I
Mm.
wrote this post about it, not really thinking that much about it. I've written lots and lots of blog posts, and so
Yeah.
it's not
Mhm.
like I put it on there thinking it was gonna get lots of attention, but it went like kind of nutty how viral it's
It's
the
true.
last, I mean,
It's true.
it's more than 10 million people. That's a few
Yeah.
years ago that I
Yeah.
even looked at the count.
Mm.
It crashed my website because so many people
Mm.
were visiting it.
Mm.
But it was such a huge, like it really disrupted my life to have this
Mm.
happen.
Yeah.
Because I suddenly realized, a, even though I wrote the post about it, I didn't have a lot of it in my own life actually.
Mm.
And it was actually during the time when my marriage was crumbling, and a few months after the post went viral, my marriage ended. And it was partly a recognition that even though I was able to define holding space,
Mhm.
there were definite absences in my life where I needed to really find it and claim it as a practice more intentionally for myself so that I could do it for other people. So I kind of had to put the brakes on and hit the pause button on my life and really kind of go dig into the practice to really claim it as something that supported me and not just other people. And yeah, it was quite a disruptive time of my life, but it's resulted in such beautiful work coming out of that, the book and the center that's now been developed.
Isn't it amazing to think that a blog post could result in like an actual whole new movement? I
Yeah.
mean, maybe it's good you didn't know.
Probably is.
It's yeah, it was in the fine print, written in another language perhaps, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, and it has to be said, your life is really like a life on steroids, as is typical of Master Life Path 11s, which we'll talk about soon. But goodness me, you've just one of those people, you make those leaps and then you just find a way to like follow through with them and for other people to come along with you. And it's what I really like about you is you don't back down. You just look for the next kind of junction.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
true.
when I trace back, I mean, even in this really short interview, like any one of those topics, could be a documentary. And the way that you're able to sort of dance through them is
Yeah.
like beyond amazing because you don't gloss over it, which a lot of people do.
Yeah.
There's a real, you've digested, from what I hear at least, you've digested a lot of it. And you're
Hmm.
almost able to kind of tour guide people back there and go, oh, when you get to this point, here's something that could work for you. So there's that, for me, there's this real sense of being shepherded.
Yeah. Yeah. So quite a few years ago, I had somebody name what they witnessed in me, that I was a meaning maker.
Mm,
And that really landed for me, because it's like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I do. Like I have, a lot of life experiences that turn into meaning, that I find a way to. It's almost like a process of like an alchemical process, turning, steel into gold, that I'm able to transform a story, or an experience, or a crisis, or a disruption. And I
mm-hmm.
find language for it to help other people navigate similar situations. So that's really been my life's work, since, especially since then.
Well, I'm into word magic, so meaning is it it's almost an anagram of naming. It's not quite, but it's
Mm,
close. It's got it within it. I
yeah.
feel like that's a lot of what you're doing. And I have to say, like I was in a group, I won't name them, but they had this real emphasis that life is meaningless until I
Mm,
suppose we create meaning. Or sometimes I didn't even get that from the group, and that really threw me actually.
mm,
It's been years since I've been in that group, but it's like it still has its tentacles in my confidence. And I know you've written about the effects of whether it was religion or things, and how there's this like
mm,
hesitation that it's just so deep. And it's
yeah.
always just as you're about to speak up, or just as you're about to take the credit for something and not give, whether it's praise to God or, the person at the top of the organization. And it's constant modulation.
Yeah.
So that's again one of the reasons I so resonate with your work. We've both had, I suppose, a
Mhm,
quite a religious or strict background, one could
mhm.
say, and then we've sort of broken free and gone kind of full wild.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I'm actually just in the process of launching a course. In fact, minutes before I jumped onto this call, I'm writing the content for this new course, and it's called Know Yourself, Free Yourself.
Yeah.
And it's self exploration as a path to liberation and love. Because I
Mm,
think that's really the work that we need to do, is examine what are the things we've picked up that became our operating system, really,
yeah.
that guide our decisions and our behaviors. And like you say, the religion, the family of origin, the lineage, the trauma, all of those things, we don't witness how they've become. It's like installing software, and then you're completely blind to the fact that this software exists in your life. But so we have to learn how to see that and witness it, and pull it apart a little bit, so that we can make more intentional choices, instead of just falling into that repeat pattern of assuming this operating system is the only way we can live.
Getting mechanical. I like it. I always had a bit of a fear of that, and it makes sense because I often go to other people hoping that they'll just rewire me, but then it's not as satisfying or sustainable as if I learn the basics.
Yeah,
That's why my
exactly.
dad always had the car open, trying to get me interested in carburetors. It's like, otherwise you get ripped off. And I think I could really apply that to all my new age courses too. Thanks. Gotta love
Mhm.
parents.
Yeah.
So last couple of questions. For the people who really struggle to meditate, especially regularly, whatever that means,
Mhm.
um, what are your tips for them? Because these are the
Yeah.
people I guess I'm really the most trying to reach through this series. And it's why I'm choosing people who, some of them are very, very like proper, what I would call proper meditators. Other of them,
Mhm.
like yourself, just really like free spirits. But there's definitely still a tranquility that I can,
Yeah.
experience of you. And that's
Yeah.
why I'm still wanting you to be here. So, what are your tips for those people?
What I've found in my life is that I just have to trust myself and find what works for me, because I have spent like far too much energy kind of beating myself up for not having a disciplined practice, like on
Mm-hmm.
the cushion kind of
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah.
And I've tried, and I've taken courses, and and there was a part of me that kept thinking, I'm not disciplined enough, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. And finally, one of the things I had to let go, that was, kind of part of my operating system, was this self-criticism over, this is the only way that it can be done.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when I actually leaned into the fact that it's not the only way it can be done.
Mm.
My body does not settle into seated meditation. And
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
discovered, and I think you saw that post
Mm,
that I shared. I because I have trauma in my past and my
mm,
body holds that trauma. And so I know, and I very specific trauma related to breathing. And I
mm,
don't know if you want me to share that little story, but I have almost been choked to death in the
mm,
past.
mhm.
And so anything that controls my breath too much actually triggers the trauma. So
Wow.
if you
Wow.
try to put me on a cushion and tell me,
Mhm.
pay attention to your breath,
Mm.
my body actually starts to get activated and I feel anxious.
Yeah.
So I recently got a Fitbit for Christmas for my kids,
Mm.
and I actually tested it. I thought I'm going to try traditional meditation, and I could see on a graph my heartbeat going up as I sat on the
Wow.
cushion.
Yeah.
And that's what I posted on social media,
Mhm.
because I said,
Mhm.
this is not something that works for my body, to
Yeah.
sit still and to try to force it into stillness and focus on my breath. So I had to let that go and realize that some bodies can do one thing, some bodies can do another thing.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
that's my main tip, is find what works for your body, mind, and soul.
Oh gosh, I feel like a lot of people are going to get something from that. Look, I brought my husband to yoga. He's a big build, he's like Russian, Japanese, and Slavic. And so he's, potato farmer build. Also, we joke that he's a bit of a hobbit too because he loves his nature. But, trying to get trying to get him in seated meditation, a downward dog, like it was, and he hurt himself because, people like me, hyper flexible, sort of tree-like people. I mean, to be honest, like yoga really suits me. It's kind of my
Yeah,
my my jam. But for him, it's martial arts. It's really intense physical activity. He does like archery, sword fighting, and that's his meditation. And for a long time, I thought he was wrong. I was like, well, you really should try harder.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but it's
That's
pretty clear,
ridiculous.
even
Like,
when you just look at his body shape
yeah,
and what he needs, even in palmistry, our skin texture of how sensitive you are. Like he explodes if you put him in a closed room, and
mm,
he just, in a way, it doesn't serve him, for his life purpose. So I'm just kind of glad that you said that,
yeah,
because I think, yeah, there's a lot of people who do benefit from certain styles of meditation, and it's about having that courage to be scientific about it, like what you did, to measure your own heart rate in a way to get
yeah,
people to back off, or to even get
yeah,
your own inner critic to back off, like get the data on it.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Profound.
yeah,
That's
yeah. It
fighting.
really
That's
made a
fighting
difference
back.
for me. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because we accept this narrative around the right and wrong way to do things. And sometimes we have to, like you say, kind of prove for ourselves that, oh, look, my body might be unique and different, but it has a right to exist in the way that it needs to exist.
Yeah, look, there's so many covert ways of keeping us quiet, whether it's what we're supposed to be eating, or, that we're supposed to be sitting quietly on a cushion. And yeah, it's very easy for
Yeah,
it to veer into control. And I think because you've had that background of a lot of control,
yeah,
I think it's a good lesson in this interview. And yeah, I'm really grateful that you again have been so open about it. So we know from numerology, because I've known you for a while, that you're a number 2911 too, so a master 11 life path, same as me, which is exciting. And at 29 I came across numerology, and it helped me to kickstart my life and meet my husband and meet you, really. um so for you, Heather, what was going on around that life path turning point, around that 29,
mm.
also known as the Saturn return?
Oh, a lot of things happened. That's when I gave birth to my first child.
Mhm.
I've given birth four times in total. I have three living daughters. So that was when I became a mother.
Yeah.
It was when we bought our first house. My husband and I had been married a couple of years. We bought a house and moved into
Yeah.
it. So there was a lot of pretty big change. I really reflect on that being the beginning of adulthood in a sense for
Wow.
me, because it was when, yeah, suddenly I was like, and I remember too, we bought a minivan. Like that
Oh
felt
my
like,
gosh.
oh my gosh, I need to be a grown up now.
I love that.
Mm,
Well, the 11 life path, it's about giving 11 out of 10. And it's pretty clear that's what you do with everything, just every area. Um, And it's also about being a double catalyst or pioneer, like not even just taking a step, but basically like a UFO ride into another dimension. And I mean, if you look back at your life, does it feel surreal sometimes of kind of how much ground you've covered?
It does. And I don't always even recognize that until somebody else points it out to me. And I had a friend fairly recently start to list all the things I'd done in the last like 7 years or something.
Yeah.
She's just looking at me. I'm like, oh yeah. Like for me, it's just my life. And so it doesn't feel unusual. But when I do have somebody reflect that back to me, I realize, oh yeah, there's a lot there.
So, you know, that extra need for holding space for yourself and for support and for rest and you know, you're so good at putting on social media when you need some time out. I could definitely learn from you. So yes, starting to close up, I was just glancing at one of your last posts. So one of the posts you've just put up is "We hold space so that all may be free." It's
Mhm.
so beautiful. That's so
Yeah.
1111. I know you see 1111 and it's this idea that's a circle of humanity, not a pyramid where we
Yeah.
crush each other.
That's so
And
much what my work is about
yeah.
is being in circle with people. Yeah.
And the other thing is this other post I saw is, if you don't mind me quoting a couple of lines, some days I look at social media and I just see one massive trauma wound. Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to need to look into that one. Of course, the irony being that I will be sharing this on social media. But
Exactly.
I
I
hope that
wrote
this
it there too.
will reach, and because you say, you know, we're in a trauma bond in terms of you receive both kindness and threat from the same source. But then at the very bottom, where do you say you want to invite, you know, everyone to look unflinchingly at the ways that social media isn't caring for us in the ways we deserve to be cared for. Be intentional about finding what you need for healing so you won't be in the spaces hurting yourselves. Be good to yourself and the people you care about. When social media doesn't support you in doing that, step away. Don't let them benefit from your wounds.
Mhm.
Of course, the beautiful thing being that you wrote that on Facebook.
Yeah.
So it's
It
kind of
rhymes.
like graffitiing on the church walls.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like
That's
that.
true.
I just really like there's this kind of like
Mm.
activist thing going on there. Well, thank you for being here on the planet, for being super amazing. How can people follow your work or connect with this, you know, new courses and things?
Yeah. Well, I'm at heatherplett.com, but if they want to follow the courses, we're launching that next week, and that's at centerforholdingspace.com. So those are my two websites, heatherplett.com and centerforholdingspace.com. On most social media, I'm just Heather Plett. So Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm not active on all of them, but Instagram and Facebook are kind of my primary places.
Well, yeah, it's just been amazing to talk to you, and I hope that we will talk again soon. So, this
Hmm.
has been a chat with Heather Plett, author of the book The Art of Holding Space, which is an amazing read, and actually love it. It says what is something like required reading for anyone who works with other humans. Oh, that's brilliant. And yeah, co-founder of the Center for Holding Space. And you have been with Sarah from sarahYip.com, Facebook, The Numbers Queen, and Instagram, SarahYip1111. So double peace signs to you and your people, Heather. I look forward to the next time you're in Australia.
I do
Um,
too.
and thank you so much for just being here. And I hope that everyone who watches this, that you will enjoy what we have discussed. Very deep topics here. And if you need help, I'll put some links at the bottom of this video. And I really encourage you to check out what Heather is doing. She is part of a pretty amazing network.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. And I'll see you next time. Okay, bye, Heather.
Bye.